This shop is protected by the Demon King by Bottle 7. Chapter 1. My life before this one was not a kind life. The world I lived in was filled with danger and magic. I was born impoverished, and suffering under the will of the upper classes. The son of a low demoness who had sold her body to live, a bastard, a mistake, a child that should not exist. And yet for the short while my mother had held me. She loved me dearly, whispering softly into my ears how she just knew I would do great things. It had only been through my grit and determination that I rose to the position that I did. My refusal to give up or stand down was the only reason why the throne became mine. I, King Asmodeus the Undying, had once ruled the most powerful nation in the world. I stood at the top as king of all demons. Countless soldiers filled my armies waiting for my every command. Nations kneeled before me trembling under my might. The rich and powerful across the world showered me with gifts and bribes for mercy. The powerless and weak fell to their knees pleading to me for their lives. Some worshipped me as though I were a god. Others thought of me as evil incarnate cursing my very name till their last breaths. My rule ran for 333 years. I'm sure today historians call my rule dark and terrible. Perhaps, maybe it was, I was not a good person or a good ruler. I was not always merciful or fair. I had an insatiable lust and greed for anything that caught my eye. Only now do I understand that I had been forever trying to fill the belly of the starving child hidden deep within my heart. Still searching for that warmth that I had only briefly felt from my sickly mother. It took me being born again to truly understand what I had wanted all along. Yes, that's right, I, Asmodeus the Undying, died. The irony of my name and my death is not lost on me, I assure you. I was slain by a human hero using the magical sword blessed by the fairy Queen Celestine. The brutality of my death was no better than a beast being slaughtered in a butcher's shop. It was sudden and quick. I had little time to react or defend myself. Seeming more incidental, as if it were a chore rather than striking down the man who had ruled the known world for so long. When the blade pierced me, I thought I had only received a punch. Or that, like with any other blade they had tried to take to me, it had broke shattering on impact with my aura. It took my hands feeling the blade disappear inside of me and the warmth of my blood quickly draining from me did I realize what had happened. I tried to form words, to speak out a curse or some sort of profound sentence for my final words. But blood had filled my throat and I could only let out a pathetic gurgle. I hit my knees first before landing face down on the tiles in front of my court in the throne room. My eyes flickered to everyone just watching. They had all just watched. Not a single one making a move to help me. Even now, in my new life, I remember still the cold tiles of the palace floor on my skin. The numbness that came from the warmth spilling out of my body. I remember reaching out my clawed hands towards one of my many lovers hoping that someone, anyone, would at the very least hold me as I took my last breath. To comfort me as I once comforted my dying mother. But in the end, I was alone. It seemed that, despite all my power, all my riches, I lacked the love that I truly desired. I remember my vision fading shortly after that. There was darkness for a long while. It was quiet and warm. I teetered between existence and the sweet taste of oblivion there. But, then I heard the sounds of dogs whining. Puppies to be exact, soft dewy whimpers, filled the air and I felt something warm run across my body. A whine left me and though I could not see I understood then, quickly, what had happened. I had been reborn. I had heard whispers of this happening amongst the sages of my kingdom. I had chalked it up to religious nonsense, especially since demon kind like myself were long-lived. Our lives were often long and almost unending. So concepts like death or even rebirth were foreign to my kind. I suppose I owe an apology to the sages I had beheaded. It seemed they were right. My new four-legged body was weak and fuzzy. Even with the slightest of movements, I felt exhausted from simply existing. I felt cold and moved closer to the large form of heat near me. I heard soft panting and I could only assume that I would soon be joined by my new siblings, judging by the soft ripples I felt against the stomach I rested upon. I don't know which god decided to give a being like me another chance. Or why my soul had been placed in the body of an animal. Or why this world felt so different than the last. The magic that had freely moved through my last world did not do that here. It existed, but it wasn't freely moving. Stagnate almost. I can only assume I was brought to this world because it was amusing. Amusing to see a man who had stood so far above everyone be brought down to a lowly beast. Regardless of the reason, I felt a strange sense of nostalgia when I was finally able to open my eyes. Though different, it was very much the same. An alley. Once again I had been born in an alley. Trash littered the ground and I shakily lifted my small head, observing the world around me. A box of some sort was my family's home. I blinked, sitting there laying on the edge of the box. It had taken a lot to get this far, to see past the tarp that covered the box. The greying skies above told me it was close to winter and would snow soon. Child. With a nudge to the side of my face, I stumbled a bit before I turned and saw the face of my mother in this life. Gaunt and sickly, she was fawn and white with soft brown eyes. She looked tired, but I saw the affection in her eyes for me. Eat. It was such a simple command I heard as she stared at me. You are sick? I replied, eat. Mother responded. I slowly turned, trying my best to walk over to her, but my body was still too young and I crawled much like my other siblings. Mother slowly laid down, staring off into the distance. I saw faded scars on her skin through her thin fur. Scars on her face and chest, places where the fur didn't quite grow back right. Though the hellhounds of my world were different, I recognized the signs. She had been used to fight. In my last life, hound fighting was a common form of entertainment. While I was no one to judge someone from a moral standing, I still found the practice abhorrent. The concept of raising something just to fight. It disturbed my soul. Even amongst the countless wars I waged, I never once raised anything for the sole purpose of fighting. I looked among my sleeping siblings, realizing then my mother had been waiting for me to nurse before going off to find more food. Among them, I was the only one who looked the way I did. My fur was black and fluffy. I didn't look like the same breed as them. Everyone else among my 6 siblings. They all looked like my mother. I wish I looked like them. I spoke slowly, crawling my way to my mother's side. You look like your father. Mother spoke up. I do. I asked. I looked at my mother, who slowly closed her eyes. She was so tired? Yes. She replied softly. Eat. She ordered again before drifting off to sleep. I watched her fall asleep before nursing as she told me. After I finished, I turned facing towards the entrance of the box, watching as the snow slowly fell down from the grey skies. I looked around at my family. Their fur was thinner than mine. Even now a few of my siblings shook in their sleep. Concern rumbled through me when I saw how cold they looked. I didn't like the cold. The lack of warmth. I didn't want my new family to experience that pain. So I closed my eyes and gathered what strength I could. Slowly the small box warmed up and the shaking ceased. Even my mother, who had fallen asleep, seemed relieved. Feeling a sense of relief wash over me, I closed my eyes, feeling my siblings sleepily move closer to me. My thick fur made me popular enough to sleep next to. Now that I was radiating heat, it wasn't long before I was piled on top of by them. But I didn't mind. The closeness made me happy and made me feel safe. A feeling that I was never afforded in my last life. The feeling of simple affection given so freely without motive. My small tail wagged just a little, though not too much. I still had to have some sort of decorum. I was, after all, a king in my last life. My mother, though simple, was dedicated to rearing us. I felt her affection every time she cleaned us or allowed us to nurse. Days passed slowly, and with each passing day, I felt my strength slowly grow. The time that I could heat the box increased, and even with snow on the ground, my siblings could stay warm. Though with the temperature dropping, it was becoming a little difficult. I lay there trying to dedicate my attention and strength to keeping us warm. With my siblings becoming more mobile with each passing day, they shifted around, playing quietly with each other. One of my brothers flopped on top of me and gummed at my ear. "Play." He spoke, his mouth still on my ear. "No. I'm working." I replied, trying to stay focused. "You are sleeping." He tried to argue. "Sleep is work for little ones like us." I retorted. "I'll work too then." He announced, letting go of my ear and shifting on top of me. I fell asleep without meaning to, with him next to me. It was just mere days after this that a terrible blizzard cut through our alley. My siblings huddled close together in the small box, shaking with my mother. The wind screamed as it cut through the tall buildings that surrounded us. I focused everything in me to warm the freezing box, to prevent the onset of frost from reaching past the tarp that covered our tiny home. "Bleeding." A small voice from beside me remarked. I sat there at the edge of the box, focusing my powers. I wasn't sure what my youngest sister meant until I felt warm liquid land on my front paw. I flicked my tongue out and tasted copper. I was bleeding. The world went black.